All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Comp 2450. I hope that you all had a fall term break. I hope that you got at least like 5 minutes to have a bit of a rest in between classes. I didn't. It was just like this breakneck pace fall term break where I was doing lots of stuff. I want to express my gratitude to the people who helped out with the Explore Science Day event, and I also want to express my gratitude for everybody that just volunteered. So there's 110 people registered in this class, and I had 20 emails from people asking to help out. And so that's like 20% of the class is volunteering to help out, and I am just, I think I may have said this before the break, but I'm saying it again now. I am overwhelmed with that. I'm really just so happy to see that you are all willing to help out with events like that. If you weren't moved by the presentations that we had earlier in the term from the Computer Science Students Association and WIX and Dev Club, I really hope that you get involved in that stuff too, because that's another good way to get involved in the goings on in the department. So what I want to spend some time talking about today is we put up the phase 3 documentation over the break, and so I want to spend some time taking a look at that. I want to give you some time to ask some questions either about that or about the project or about whatever you want. And then what I want to do is spend a little bit of time just doing some brief review of the persistent stuff that we talked about before the break. So this is going to be in the form of some Mentimeter questions. And then I want to backfill something. So one thing that I feel like we missed out on with testing was the idea of testing our logic layer methods. And so I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about that. And I want to talk about something related to testing our logic layer methods that's a happy side effect of using dependency injection. But I'm going to say it now, and I'll say it again when we get to this point. I want to be very clear that it's not required for you to do what we're going to talk about here. I just want to show you this cool thing that you can accomplish with dependency injection and testing that we've got for our logic layer classes. So what I want you to be able to do by the end of today's class is continuing. I want you to be able to persist and load data and its relationships using structured text format. So again, we'll do some Mentimeter questions about this. I'm not going to spend a ton of time dwelling on the idea of JSON anymore because that's not really the important part of this class. But all the examples that I've done in class are up on the repository that I've been sharing with you throughout the term. And the other thing I want you to be able to do is implement a test harness, but really specifically, I want you to be able to write some tests for your logic layer methods, for methods that have logic in them, kind of thinking about the setup that we have to do for this logic layer test, and then the kinds of things that we can do using dependency injection as we've set it up so far in the course. So first and foremost, I want to spend some time taking a look at our overview of phase 3, and then really briefly taking a look at one of the different options that we've got for this. So the focus for phase 3, as I kind of described in class, is on testing and persistence. That's the main focus here. So we're not looking to add any new tasks or features. We're not really looking to add or change your domain model. We're really just looking for an assessment of implementing verification of the software. So you are going to write code that shows that your code works the way that you're expecting it to work, given the kinds of inputs that people like your parents would give when they're working with it. And then I want you to be able to take the state that you've got, and I want you to be able to push that down into a file. So I want you to be able to save the state that you've got here. Part of the testing stuff that we're doing and part of the testing stuff that you're going to be doing is you're going to be writing tests for your own implementation of a stack. This is something that I'd expect you to cover as part of the test coverage of the stuff that you've got. But what I also want you to be able to do is help me out because I'm a really crappy programmer, and I've written some implementations of a stack, and I want you to take the test suite that you've written for your own stack implementation and run it against my stacks, and then tell me what's wrong with the implementations of stacks that I've got. So I'll tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. But the main things that we're looking for you to be able to do here is to create some test data. So I want you, for one small thing, I don't want you to make a comprehensive set of test data for everything. I want you to make tests, but I don't want you to document the test data for everything. The main thing that I want you to create test data for is the stack. I want you to implement a test harness that automates the testing of your software and this abstract data type. Again, verbally, I'm telling you, please just copy my test harness. You do not need to write that by yourself. You can use exactly the structure that I've got. You can just copy and paste my code into yours. You have my permission to do that. But you have to then write all the supporting tests that are necessary to accomplish the testing. And I want you to be able to persist and load data and its relationships using a structured text-based format. So kind of like what we were doing in class, I want you to take your own domain model instances and write those out to JSON files so that in different circumstances, based upon the project choice that you've selected, you can recover the state that you have from previous executions. We can hit the stop button and then hit the play button and kind of start off where we were when we left off. I still do want you to be able to use preconditions, postconditions, and invariants to validate the runtime behavior of an abstract data type and other methods that you have in your code. So I'm still looking for you to have preconditions on your logic layer methods and postconditions and some invariants for your domain model objects. And in terms of dividing code from a complex project into higher level modules, I'm looking for you to have a persistence layer now. So I want to have a persistence layer that has purely the responsibility of doing persistence, a logic layer that has purely the responsibility of doing logic, and a UI layer that has purely the responsibility of actually doing the input and output to the person that's sitting in front of your software. In terms of what we're asking you to submit, it's almost exactly the same as what we've been asking you to submit so far. We want you to provide us with a README and an implementation. The README is going to have everything that you would have had otherwise in previous phases. But one thing that we are looking for you to have here now is some description of the testing data that you're going to use for the stack implementation itself. This is the only test data that we want you to write out in advance for us. You don't need to write out test data for your logic layer. You still need to test your logic layer and your domain model objects, but you don't need to write that out in a table in this format. The only thing that we're looking for here is for the stack implementation itself. You don't need to put a table in your Markdown file. Oh my gosh, writing tables in Markdown is possible. Yes, yeah. But it's painful and really annoying to have to do this. There are plugins for Vim. I use a table Markdown plugin for Vim. There are plugins for VS Code that will let you do formatting of tables like this. But gosh, it's really painful to set that up. You can also just submit an Excel formatted spreadsheet. That is super fine. That is super, super fine. What we're looking for is the columns that we have here. So the method that you're testing, the data that you're putting into that method, and the expected outcome that you're expecting to see as a result of that. So this is an example of what you might expect to have in your own set of data for a stack for the push method and all the expected outcomes that you can get from this. So either have a table that looks something like this in your Markdown file, or a statement in your Markdown file that says, please look at this Excel spreadsheet that's sitting alongside the submission that I've made, or sitting alongside the README file that I've got here. I have provided you with 5 implementations of a stack. I'm going to show you how you can get those implementations of a stack. But the other thing I'm looking for you to have in your README for this is a description for each of these stack implementations of what I've done wrong with these stacks. I'll say this again when we get to this. There are logical errors. So like the state will not be correct in the way that you're expecting it to be correct. So methods will return unexpected values based upon what's actually in the stack, for example. I'm going to scroll past all this stuff because it kind of looks like the same as what you should have for phase 2. I'm going to scroll past this. One of the things that I want you to do when you're thinking about phase 3 is I want you to fully remove any code that you're not actually using in your project anymore. So that means that if you still have the REPL that you've submitted for phase 2, it should be removed. I'll come to you in just a second. It should be completely removed. The graders are also going to be looking through your code with IntelliJ and looking to see if there are no usages. So when there are methods that are marked as no usages, that's the kind of thing that we're looking for. Submit less code as opposed to more code here. So don't have any methods that are not used. Yeah.
Does this include the main models that are only used in like flows of interaction that we haven't implemented yet?
In phase 3, if there's code that's unused, you should remove it. So if you have a partially implemented thing that you don't actually use anywhere else, then you shouldn't submit it at all. Yeah. The stacks that I want you to work with are something that I'm providing to you as a dependency. What I'm looking for you to do with your pom.xml file is add this new repository. So this is going to go after that /properties tag in your pom.xml file. And the dependency that I want you to add here is my stack implementation. So the artifact here is called stack. The version is fall 2025. And it has those 5 classes, bad stack 1, bad stack 2, 3, 4, 5. And it also has the stack interface. The stack interface is exactly the same as what you copied and pasted into your own code. And so what that means is that you're going to have to remove the one that you copied and pasted. You'll have to delete that interface for phase 3, and you'll have to change the dependency to the one that I have. You'll have to change the stack interface to the one that's in this jar file. And then for your test itself, instead of creating just the instance of your stack, you should additionally then go through the 5 different stacks that I have provided to you for the assessment here. The other thing that I want to point at before we get to this point is I'm going to pop back up here, and I'm going to go back 1, and I'm going to go to phase 3, and I'm just going to look at one of these. I'll let you look at them all on your own independently based on whichever one you have selected. For each of the project's ideas, we have described to you the points that we want you to save things. So you're not going to be constantly saving stuff to disk or to file as you're going through your software. There's only going to be points that we want you to do this at. And these are kind of logical points based on the different projects that you have here. So for the battleship project, what we're looking for is once the game has been set up, so the players have placed all their ships, then we want you to save the state of where you're at right now. After a turn has fully completed, so you've gone through all of the steps for a turn for one of the players, then you should save the state of this game. And the idea here is that we'd want you to be able to restart a game kind of in the middle if it gets shut off or if the power is lost, that sort of thing. For the other 2 projects, and I will quickly look at one of these other projects here. I'll look at the library. The library here, the points of persistence that we're looking at here are you've made a new profile. So I've made a new member and I want to save the member that I've made after this point. You've borrowed a media. I want to save that you borrowed a media so that we don't lose that record of what you've got. You've returned a piece of media. I don't want to call you 5 days later and say your book is overdue because you returned it and we just happened to lose it. So their points of interaction of persistence here are kind of limited compared to the overall number of tasks that you've got, but these are logical places that we'd want you to save everything. Going to go down here to our rubrics, and what we've got here are the rubrics for each of the things that we've got. The first thing that we're looking to assess is the test data that you're providing to us for those stack implementations. So this is going to be that table or the Excel spreadsheet that you're providing to us with the test data for the stack implementation. Again, I don't want to see test data for other stuff that you have in your own project. I'm just looking for the stack test data itself. That's the only thing that I'm really looking for here. The implementation stuff, what we're looking for then is going to be on the coverage of your tests. So when I ran our tests in class, and I can show this again today, When I ran our test in class 2 weeks ago, I guess, I showed run with coverage option, and it showed that nice table of these are all the lines that have been covered and have not been covered. What we're looking for here is really that you have covered a reasonable amount of your code base and based on the number of tasks that you have implemented. So the more tasks you've implemented, the more you can kind of get for this one. I'll note that to get the exceptional part here, you don't have to get 100% test coverage. I don't really think that's a valuable task for anyone to want to do. It's kind of a waste of effort to get to 100% code coverage. So we're really looking just to get to 70% or more and all of the tasks that are described. I also want you to, we're going to assess you on the identification of the bugs that have been put into the stack implementations that we're providing to you. We're looking to assess you on the persistence implementation, the code quality, and design by contract as you proceed with this. So when we're thinking about the implementation here, what we're looking for is stuff like you have new code, you have appropriate pre and post conditions for the methods that you've added if you are going to be doing that. We want you to make sure that you're still doing single responsibility principle. So the layers that you've got are doing just what they're supposed to do. The persistence layer just does persistence. The UI layer is the only one that does input and output, excuse me, and the logic layer does logic. We want you to use dependency injection so that you are adhering to this dependency inversion principle. We're looking to make sure you don't have any unused code in your submission, and then the quality of code regarded, kind of with thinking about the course programming standards in mind. And that's the end of that. All right. So again, this is just really testing and persistence. We're not looking to add new features or tasks to anything that you've got so far. It's really just about testing and persistence here. So I will answer questions verbally right away, but I'm also going to have some time here for questions up on the Mentimeter. So let me quickly pop over here. I'll show you that QR code, and you have a question, so I will answer your question right now.
Is it possible to go over like how we'll be adding the bad stats?
I can very quickly do that, yes. I will, when we get to the part where I'm going to show you testing, more testing stuff, the testing the logic layer, I'll add that dependency to my project, yeah. Yeah.
For the test coverage, how are you making the 70%? Because you said we're not supposed to be testing the UI layer. So when you measure the 70%, is that just looking at like the main logic and persistence layers, or is it still
We'll be looking at, that's a great question. I'm really sorry for talking over you, forgive me. That's a great question. When we're measuring the 70%, we're really looking at the logic layer, the validation of your domain model, and actually not that much of persistence. The focus is going to be on the validation of stuff. So like the examples that we did in class, and then the logic layer itself. Persistence is a happy side effect. It will probably get called, and I'm going to talk more about that when we get to the testing the logic layer stuff in a moment. But that's not something that we're too concerned about testing for this. Yeah.
We should remove any unused code. However, if we're doing our testing part properly, we should have no unused code, correct?
I mean, if you're testing code that's not used anywhere else, I guess that would make it harder for us to find it. Maybe to answer your question indirectly, like I'm not going to have the graders going around and looking at every method and right-clicking on it and saying find usages. I'm not going to do that. That would be a massive waste of time for the graders to do that, and I don't want them to spend their time doing that. It's more like obvious thing, like you haven't actually called this or tested it anywhere, you shouldn't have it in the code base that you've got. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna pop over to the Mentimeter here. You're welcome, I guess. I hope that's, I will take that as a positive. That's a good question. So the last day that I would say that you should be submitting phase 2 is 2 weeks before the last day of classes, but that's cutting it real tight. That is cutting it real tight. I don't know if you're cooked. I don't know if you're cooked, but the last day would be 2 weeks before the last day of classes. I'm really sorry. I hope it's going okay. I really do hope it's going okay. If it takes all of 2 weeks, the fastest we can really promise is 2 weeks. That's kind of the reasonable amount of time that that it takes to get our graders taking a look at stuff. When we're looking at these submissions, I'm going to pop back over here quickly. For phase 3, there are no mastery outcomes. So there's nothing after this phase for you to submit. So there's no mastery of anything for phase 3 to submit. So that's not something that you would need to worry too much about to resubmit in terms of achieving mastery for anything. But again, it's kind of about 2 weeks for things to take place. If you're finding that it's taking longer than 2 weeks to get you feedback, please let me know, and either I will step in and just do the assessment for you, or I will make sure that the graders are on top of things. I don't really know how to answer this question other than kind of just do the best you can. So this goes way, way back to the beginning of the course, I think, and please just take this for what it's worth. A lot of people ask the question related to things like, do courses do grade curving? That's a really common question for people to ask at the beginning of a term. One of the things that I will say is that as we get to the end of the term and we're starting to have a clearer picture of what performance looks like overall, adjustments can be made at the back end. So this is me kind of behind the scenes doing stuff. This is your other instructors kind of behind the scenes doing stuff. Adjustments can be made behind the scenes to do things like maybe phase 3 is, so what we've got right now is that phase 3 here is currently scored out of 50 points. Maybe phase 3 is actually supposed to be scored out of 30 points. And if you got 30 out of 50, then you have achieved 100% of that thing that we've got here. I'm not promising that that's going to happen, and I can't really promise like how that would happen if it does happen. I'm just saying that it's possible for that to happen, especially as we start getting to the end of the term and we start to have a clearer picture of what that all looks like. So I don't know if that's helpful. I don't know if that's helpful, but I hope it's at least a little bit helpful in terms of like things can happen after submissions have been made to allow for things like that happening. That depends. If you're submitting phase 3 2 weeks before the last day of classes, then yes, that would be something that you should expect. But if you're submitting it on the last day of classes, we can't get it back to you within like 24 hours or less. The time for grading for all phases is for all submissions, I should say, is 2 weeks. Again, if you're kind of getting nervous, I invite you to email me and contact me as soon as you can, and I can try to help move things forward for you. The submission requirements are that if you haven't met mastery for phase 2, you must meet mastery for phase 2 before you can submit phase 3. If you're in a state where you're like right at the end and you can't get it, just please let me know and I will try to help make sure that this happens. The other advice I can give you here now is as you're submitting phase 2, don't stop. Don't stop working on phase 2. Keep working on phase 3 stuff and make sure that you can submit it on short notice if you need to. In the README, yes, it's just the test data for the stack. We're not looking for any other kinds of test data, so we don't need you to tell us about the test data that you'd have for your logic layer stuff. So you don't necessarily have to test all the methods that you've created. Again, this is really an idea of we want you to cover a reasonable number of the lines of code and methods and classes that you have implemented. So we're looking for you to do some test of most things. I'd say that things that you probably don't want to test are like accessors. Testing to see if an accessor works doesn't really make a lot of sense in terms of test coverage. It's more like complex stuff that we would want you to be focusing on here. Yeah, so if I understand this question correctly, please correct me if you're able to, but when you're submitting the tests, the thing that we would really want you to have still enabled in your test suite is the one for your own implementation of a stack. I don't want to see test failures on my stack implementations. I just want you to document those. So when you're submitting this, just use your own correct implementation for the stack test.
I think, I don't know who asked it, but it seemed like they were asking if they should use the good stack in their own code.
Oh, I would say just use your own stack implementation in your own code. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for the clarification, if that indeed was what the question was. I'm not really sure how to answer this question. I mean, part of what phase 2 is actually building the application. That's kind of the core part of what phase 2 is. Phase 1 is a lot about building the design, so starting to think about how your software layers, even though we hadn't talked about it at that point, starting to think about how our software layers are interacting with each other. Phase 2 is now actually building the software, and that's kind of the hard part of software development. So I think that it kind of fits in with what the idea of phase 2 is, which is building up the software itself. What's the most popular choice? I think that the most popular choice is the library, I think. I really think it is. The most fun, I'm biased because I think the most fun is the Battleship game. I don't really have a lot of fun interacting with the library. I don't really have a lot of fun interacting with the library, but I would have some fun playing the game. And what's the most difficult, according to me? They all have intentional challenges that are put into them that are not just the stack implementation part. The one that's the most abstract, I think, is probably the library scheduling thing. I think that's probably the most abstract idea that we have in this whole thing. The activity tracker itself, I like that because it's something that I use on a fairly regular basis as a piece of software in my real life. But the most fun one for sure is the Battleship game. We'll take a look at one more question here. If you have submitted the wrong thing and you haven't yet received feedback, let me know, please let me know, and I can remove the submission that you've made so that you can resubmit the correct thing. All right, thank you all for taking the time to ask some questions. I really hope that you're all doing okay. I really, really do hope that you're all doing okay. Like I said, I don't know if this helps. I really don't know if this helps, but if we get a bigger picture at the end of things went terribly wrong in the way that we're doing these assessments, stuff can change after the fact. But again, I can't really promise, and I can't really promise exactly how that structure is going to look. If there are questions that you still have here that I haven't been able to answer in class verbally, please take the time to post those on the course forum, and I'd be happy to answer those questions kind of asynchronously after the fact. All right, so what I want to do now is I want to switch back to my slides very briefly. I'm going to show you the exact same QR code, and I'm going to go back to Mentimeter here. And what I want to do is spend a little bit of time thinking about persistence. So I'll give you a couple seconds to join up if you haven't already, and then we'll get started with some persistence questions. All right. All right, cool. So in class, what we did last week was we spent some time taking this idea of a trainer and persisting, not last week, 2 weeks ago, we took this idea of a trainer and we persisted that trainer down into one single file that was called trainers.json. Trainers.json had trainers in it, as its name implies, as it says on the box, but it also had Pokemon in it. And as we're proceeding to what we're going to be thinking about with testing our logic layer, it also has like Pokemon moves and stuff in it, which is not really exactly related to trainers. Having one file per domain model object also makes sense. It would make sense for us, instead of putting the entirety of Pokemon inside of trainers.json, to have a separate file that's called pokemon.json and have references between those files. So kind of in the same way that we had this set up where we had a trainer can have friends, trainers are aggregated of other trainers, we have this unique name or reference that allows us to load up these relationships between things. Having two separate files, one for a Pokemon and one for a trainer, would make sense if we have the information to be able to stitch those things back together. Really, really importantly though, no matter how many JSON files we've got, 1, 2, 3, or one per domain model object, our UI layer and our logic layer don't have to know or care. They don't have to know anything about how these things are loaded up or how they're stored on disk. They really just have to know that when they call this method, they get back these fully populated instances of things. So having one file that just contains everything is a very reasonable thing to choose for this course. Having one per domain model object is also a very reasonable thing to have. Having, I don't know how many, is also pretty reasonable to have for this course, but I would say that either one or one per domain model object is probably the closest thing that kind of makes sense for what we've got in terms of the structure of the classes that we've got here. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah. That's a good question. Does that change if you're doing finer grained persistence? As we proceed to Comp 2452 and we start thinking about using SQL, so using an actual relational database to persist the data that we've got in our domain model objects, we're going to start to get closer to having one table per domain model object. And we will also start to have even tables that represent the relationships between things. So where we have an array that has names in it, in this case, we'll have a table that is trainer Pokemon, and it will have references kind of back and forth between these two things. So as you do finer grained, that's where we're starting to do SQL stuff. Yeah, you're going to get closer to one domain model object per thing. You could still do fine-grained persistence with one single massive JSON file if you wanted to. A structure that you could have for this is you have a key in your JSON file that's called trainers, and a key that's called Pokemon, and a key that's called items, and that sort of thing. You could do this. It just means that your JSON code is going to get more complicated as you build up that structure. Yeah, yeah. All right. Here's another question. All right. So remember the idea of composition and aggregation. This is kind of going all the way back to the beginning of the course now. We're doing this full circle thing. If I've got a class A that is composed of instances of B, then at least for the persistence stuff that we've been thinking about here, I want to take each instance of A and I want to persist the entire thing plus all related instances of B if it's composed of each other. So the example that we had in class was trainers and Pokemon. A trainer is composed of the team of Pokemon that it has. So it that instance of a trainer has ownership of all of the Pokemon instances that are attached to it. And what we were doing in class is I'm going to persist the entire trainer object itself, plus all of the instances of that class B that I have here. So the composition relationship here implies that I'm going to embed everything. I'm going to save everything about the owning class and all of the classes that it's also composed of. Yeah.
Does this mean we only need one JSON file for them?
Again, you could have two if you wanted to. The structure that I've got is that they're just all embedded within one single JSON file. So Pokemon instances don't really live separately anymore. They're just contained within the trainer that owns that instance. Yeah. Okay, and then here is a very related question. Okay, awesome. Yeah. So if we have this aggregate relationship, so that means that we have an instance A and an instance B. They are related to each other. They know about each other. They have some relationship, but there's no ownership here. The instance of A and the instance of B kind of exist independently of one another. So what we want to save here is if I'm saving this instance of A, I want to save all of its properties and then any relationships that it currently has with these other instances of B. But I don't want to also persist those things. I just want to make changes to the thing that I'm trying to save right now. As we get into Comp 2452 and as we start thinking about SQL and stuff, what we might be starting to think about is this idea of cascading these things where we're taking instances and saving sub-instances and saving references directly. But for us in this course, the thing that we really care about with composition and aggregation of our domain model objects is that with composition, I want to save everything. I want to save the instance and all relationships that it's got. And with aggregation, I want to save the thing and just the relationships. So I don't want to actually persist the whole thing. I just want to save the relationships that we've got here. All right, so Edith and Elsa are up on the top here. Here's the very last question. Do any of you know who that is? Okay, good. So this is the right age group of people to know who that is. Yeah, awesome. This is younger than me and older than my children, but somehow I still know who Bob the Builder is. I should have given you more time for this. I'm really sorry. All right, awesome. Yeah. So when we were doing user inputs initially, and we were starting to take a look at our domain model objects in the context of these are things that are going to be constructed by my parents, using inputs that are provided by my parents. These are things that are going to be constructed by something that is actually entered on the keyboard. One of the side effects, or one of the purposes of that was I want to be able to push off the responsibility of validation into these builder classes that are responsible for constructing instances of these objects. We already wrote them, so we might as well use them. That's a fair thing to take, and I will give some spiritual credit to this. I will give some spiritual credit to this option too. We can only use builder because we made all the constructors private. And that's kind of like, Franklin, you dummy, the way that we construct this stuff. How else are we supposed to do this in the first place? That's true, and so I will give some spiritual credit to that. But the one that I really want to have focusing on here is we were able to validate the data that was provided to us by our parents and by the people using our software with these builders. And now we can also validate that the data that has been written to these files is valid. I can't stop you from entering into trainers.json and looking at your team and changing the level of your Pikachu to 100. I cannot stop you from doing that, but I can stop you from changing it to -5. That's something I can stop you doing using these validation approaches, using these builder objects. It is a happy coincidence that we have this kind of similarity between the way that this specific JSON library works and our own internal data model and our domain model. But the main thing that we get that's a benefit of this is that we're able to basically say, you can try to make changes to these files, and I can make sure that the changes that you've made are still valid in the context of what I consider to be valid in this system. And that's powerful. I can't stop you from messing with your levels. I can't stop you from changing Pikachu from having, oh my gosh, what is a good one? Like Thunder, that's a great move to have for a Pikachu. I can't stop you from having those things in the file, but I can make sure that the changes that you've made are actually valid for what we've got here. All right, drum roll, please. Elsa and Edith, stick at the top. And I'm up on the leaderboard today. So congratulations to whoever Elsa is. And thank you all for participating in this Mentimeter. All right, so what I would start to do here is testing the logic layer methods. But I think what I'm going to do is switch slightly instead. What I want to do here is I want to quickly show you what we're expecting you to do for making changes to your POM file for depending on our stack implementation. And then we'll take a look at this in class on Wednesday. So I'm going to pop over here to my IntelliJ. I'm going to make this bigger for everybody to see. Oh, come on. There we go. Okay. I'm going to undo the changes that I've got here. And what we're expecting you to do here approximately is I want you to take the dependency here. This is the repository that I put in the description of the phase 3 overview. This is basically saying, I want you to pull these dependencies that we have down here from the Maven Central repositories. These are out on the internet. But I also want you to pull some dependencies, if you can't find them there, from this location. This is something that I've set up on my own personal web space on the CS web servers. And then I want you to add this dependency of a stack here. So this is the other thing that I'm looking for you to add to your POM file. This will then pull in the dependency for the stack implementations itself. So if we look at external libraries here, you'll see that there's this stack that we're depending upon here in addition to all the other stuff that we've got. And then what we're looking for you to do here is in your test suite. So I'm just going to make, I'll just go into this test trainer thing here. What we're looking for you to do now is the stack implementation that we want you to use is the one that's in this jar file, in this dependency that we've got. So replace any references to your own stack with this one. And then when you are doing your tests, you can do stuff like this. So stack string is equal to new bad stack 1. Angle brackets like that, semicolon, import this as a dependency here. Whoops, I have missed the keyword new here. Do your tests on that stack implementation, and then rerun your tests using bad stack 2 and rerun your tests using bad stack 3 to accomplish this. Once we take a look at this stuff again, next class, what we're going to be focusing on is this idea of testing logic layer methods. But I don't want to start this today in the last 3 minutes of class and then kind of have to stop very shortly after that. So what I'm going to say here is, at this point, you should continue to be able to persist and load data and its relationships using a structured text-based format like JSON. And you should be able to implement a test harness. You should continue to be able to do this. But what we're going to start doing on Wednesday next class is to start thinking